Samach Zayin at the bottom. Samach Zayin, I'm an Aleph at the bottom. 67a at the very bottom. Up to Amar Rabbi Abahu is my understanding. Last chance to correct me on that, but my understanding is that we're up to 2.5 lines up from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Abahu. New end, although it's going to refer to what we saw earlier. Right, so the basic idea is we're talking about the concept of nosen tam lifgam, that if something is not kosher, but the flavor and the flavor of the non-kosher item enters the flavor of something you want to eat, but that the flavor is a net result of making it worse, then most opinions we saw so far say that works, but there are caveats we've gotten into, and now see the next bit. So it says, Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Abahu says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kosher tamo u'masho aser. Velokin Allah. Anything that has the flavor and the substance of it is forbidden, and there is lashes for eating it. So not only is it not enough, not only is it forbidden, but it's a full-fledged avera that there'd be lashes if someone would eat it. And what is that? This is when there's one kazayas in a span of pras. A pras is half of a loaf that is bought with a pundian coin when the price of flour is 3 saw for 1 selah. So the Gemara in Eruvin goes through a whole calculation how much that is. It comes out to be, the debate there is either 6 or 8 egg sizes. is a full loaf, and so pras would have either 3 or 4 eggs worth. So if one kazayas, which also debate, but let's say it's 1/2 of an egg out of 6 eggs, or 1/27 to 8 eggs. So someone's doing 1/6 and 1/8 of what you're eating is not kosher. Then that's what they call enough kosher. Someone eats enough non-kosher. Someone eats it, he would get lashes. If the percentage is lower than that, it's still forbidden to eat it because you can taste it, as we'll see. But there'd be no lashes. It's not a full violation. It's a partial violation if it's a lower percentage, not kosher than that. Tamo, it's taste v'lo mamasho, and not the substance of the non-kosher food. Aser, it's still aser of ain't looking love. There's no lashes because the percentage is too low. You can still taste it, so it's still forbidden, but it's not enough of the substance to be lashed for it. V'im riba tam lifgam, but if the increase of the flavor was a net negative result, mutter, then it's permitted. Okay, that's the statement. It says, "V'lema, why do you say im nasan tam lifgam mutter? Why doesn't it say it the way we've said until now? If it gave a negative flavor, then it's permitted. Why do you say im riba tam? If an addition of its flavor was net negative, why do we phrase it differently here? Right, the addition of flavor. Why do we add that phrase in? Hakamashalan, it's come to teach us to afal gala, even though that there are other things in it, to pagma bahade that have the net flavor together with it, it's going to be permitted. For example, let's say, I don't know if I come with an example. Let's say you have a certain dish, and the non-kosher lemon juice falls in the dish, and this food and lemon mix fine. You have chicken. There are people who like lemon chicken. I personally don't, but there are people who like lemon chicken. But you wouldn't want to have, let's say, I don't know, I've never tried it, lemon curry chicken. Like curry and lemon maybe don't go together. So chicken and lemon is fine, but the curry was already in the chicken. So when you add the lemon to the curry chicken, now it doesn't taste good. So until now, you would have thought, okay, the lemon plus chicken, if that would be a bad flavor, then that's called nosen tam lifgam. But if there's some other additive that combined with the lemon is negative, we might have called that nosen tam lifgam. But if the curry powder is what makes the lemon have a net negative result in the chicken, here it's teaching us that's enough to be called negative, and it would be permitted if you decide to eat it anyway. You have your lemon curry chicken. Again, it could be lemon curry chicken tastes good. I don't know. I've never tried it. But assuming that it doesn't, you're still allowed to have it because it's a net negative result adding that lemon juice. Halacha is collision of Basra to Reish Lakish. The second formulation of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says that when you're evaluating nose and tam of gum, then you evaluate based on the current situation, and you don't make apologies for it. Like for example, it says the opposite, that the lemon with chicken doesn't taste good unless you add enough salt. You add enough salt, then the lemon itself tastes good. So right now, there was no salt. So right now, the net result is negative, even though you could say, yeah, let's add some salt, and the whole thing will taste good. Even the lemon juice part will taste good. But right now it is a net negative result, then that is enough. That's what we said. Halacha is like Reish Lakish said that in the second version of Reish Lakish. So Amar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says, "Midivrei kulam." From all these opinions we quoted, nilmod, we will learn nosim tam of gam mutter, that something that gives a negative flavor is permitted. Amalei Abai. Abai says back, "Mishlama mikulha." From all these other Amoraim, I understand you see it. That makes sense. According to Reish Lakish, Amru Ka'amar. It says, Reish Lakish says, they said that nosim tam is good. It doesn't say Reish Lakish says Reish Lakish is good. The way it said is Reish Lakish, nosim tam of gam she'amru. When they said that nosim tam of gam is mutter, they said in this circumstance. He didn't say nosim tam of gam is mutter. It's when they're talking about nosim tam of gam being permitted, and when that negative flavor is being permitted, they said it in this circumstance. It doesn't sound like he's saying it. It says that someone else said it. I'm just explaining what that opinion holds. But you don't see that Reish Lakish himself agreed that nosim tam of gam is permitted. It says, Amru Kamar. He said they said that it's permitted, not that he said it. The Leilo Surah, to him, he did not hold it. He did not hold it. He himself did not hold of it. Like when it says Miklal, the fact that Abai is coming saying it's permitted, that implies the Ika Lamandama, there is an opinion, nosim tam of gam aser. That there is an opinion that says even though there's a net negative flavor that imparted, it's still prohibited. So yes, Vatanya, because it says in the Brisa. Now, normally, most cases, when it says Vatanya, but it taught in the Brisa, that's a disproof. But there are several cases throughout Shas, especially in Adarim, but several cases other places, that Vatanya is what we call Minichusa. It's said gently, meaning here's a proof for it. Here's where it's quoted. It's an example. Vatanya, here's where it says that. Echad nosein tam nifkam. Whether it gives a bad flavor, the flavor in part was bad. The echad nosein tam nishvach, where the flavor in parts was good. Asur, it's prohibited. Divrei Rei Meir, according to Rei Meir. Rabbi Shimon says l'shvach asur. If it's a net positive flavor, it's prohibited. Nifkam, but if it's a net negative flavor, then mutter. It's permitted. I'm going to ask now. So now we see that it is a debate. Do you say this net negative effect isn't permitted or prohibited? It says, my time in Meir. What's the reasoning behind Rei Meir? It says, Gamar migu'ule ovdei kahanim. We learn out from the fact they had to kasher the vessels of non-Jews. When they conquered Midian, Shem said, Elazar says, before you can use, you conquered Midian, you take all our pots and pans. Before you can use the pots and pans, you have to kasher them. Now, why do you have to kasher them? There's a basic idea that the flavor in the walls of a pot and pan gets stale after 24 hours. So they conquered the pots and pans. Why do you have to kasher them? Just wait until it's 24 hours old, and then the flavor itself is going to be stale, and you're going to cook in it. It's nosim tam of gam. So why does the Torah tell you have to? And the Torah says you have to kasher it. So rabbinically, the rabbis would say you have to, even practically, you have to kasher. At Torah level, there's no reason to kasher it after 24 hours. Must be that nosim tam of gam is prohibited, and that's why you have to kasher, because otherwise, just wait 24 hours is permitted. Love nosim tam of gam, who isn't it give a negative flavor? Amar Rachman, the Torah says, the Asur Rachman, the Torah prohibited it until you kasher it. Hachinami here also loshana, it makes no difference here. In other cases, any type case of the net effect is negative, even if it's not stale, even though it's an effect that the thing you're adding itself tastes good, just the combination is no good, still it should be prohibited. For idach, and the other opinion, the Rav is permitted, can Rav Huna, like Rav Huna explained it. Bereda Rav Chia, Huna son of Rav Chia, Dam Rav Huna Bereda Rav Chia, Rav Huna son of Rav Chia said, the whole reason that you had a kasha, the only thing the Torah forbade was a vessel within the first 24 hours. Meaning they conquered the land, they wanted to cook in it right away. If you want to cook in it right away, you have to kasher it. If you're going to wait 24 hours, on Torah level, you don't have to kasher. Medically, you're going to still have to kasher. But Torah level, the whole discussion, you have to kasher it so you can use it within the first 24 hours. The low lifkam, and that at that point it is not a net negative. Who it is? It's not negative. So you see, it was for the first 24 hours. The other opinion says it's prohibited. It says kedera bas yoma, even a pot within the first 24 hours. Nami, it's also you have in the pot with low pagma porta. That has to be at least a little bit negative. There's something a little bit negative there. In fact, it was sitting in the walls of the pot, even though for a little short time. But it's not, it's not the actual food itself. It's not fresh flavor. Therefore, it's for sure at least a little bit negative, and still the Torah says you have to kasher. It must be that even a negative flavor is permitted. Rabbi Shimon, my time, the other opinion, Rabbi Shimon says permitted. What's his source that says no Talmud is permitted? Time it says in the Brisa, Lo ta'achlu kol nevela. Don't eat any kind of dead animal that was not slaughtered, a carcass. Lager shebishirecha. Rather, it says give it to a convert in your gates, and the verse continues. So it doesn't quote it. You should give it. And he'll eat it. Right? So don't eat an animal that was not slaughtered. Instead, you should give it to a stranger, a non-Jew. A non-Jew. It says, Kol haru'ya lager, anything that's fit to give to a stranger, kuri nevela, that's called a carcass that was not slaughtered. She'ein ru'ya lager, but it's not fit to give a stranger because it's just not edible. It tastes bad. Einu kuri nevela is not called a nevela. It's not called a carcass that's forbidden. So you have something that's so spoiled that you can't eat it, that just doesn't taste good. You're not going to give it to a non-Jew. Right? You're not going to give it to a non-Jew to eat. So if you're not giving it to a non-Jew to eat, you yourself would be allowed to eat it. I don't know if you want to, but if it's not fit for consumption, it's no longer not kosher. So you're allowed to eat it. Maybe lutefisk counts in that. It's actually a discussion. Something was made non-edible and it's part of the process of making it into food, and then you turn it back into food afterwards, is that permitted? Classic example of that is gelatin. Gelatin is not edible. When you mix it with other foods, it becomes edible. You finish processing and edit it, but along the way, gelatin is not edible. So there's a discussion, well, since at some point in the process it's completely not edible, that's lo sin tam lefgam, that's a negative flavor. In fact, at the end of the process, it now becomes something that you want. Does that make it revert back to its permitted status or not? And there are some minority opinions that say no. Once it becomes inedible, then it's permitted forever. However, unfortunately for those who like gelatin, the main opinion is that no. The fact that at the end of the day it's now edible again, that it goes back to being non-kosher. That's why you have to get kosher gelatin. But there are minority opinions out there that say not. But we just don't. That's not our rule. Okay. Rabbi Meir, so what does Rabbi Meir do with that juxtaposition? It says, don't eat it, rather give it to a convert. That seems to indicate that almost something that's fit to give to a convert, you can't eat. It says, that case, that's something that was rotted in the first place, that it was never edible for a human. It was spoiled in the first place. I guess while the animal was alive, spoiled it. It had leprosy. Rashi explains that this animal was something you never would have touched, even when it was, even before it became a carcass. So something like that, that's permitted. That's what the Torah has to permit. But something that was permitted and then being spoiled, the fact that it was prohibited at some point, the fact that it's spoiled now, that does not make it permitted. That's what Rabbi Meir will hold. Rabbi Shimon says, and how does Rabbi Shimon respond to that? A carcass that in the first place was rotted does not need, the Torah doesn't need to tell us that's permitted. That's just dirt. That there's no substance to it. There's no reason why the Torah ever would have prohibited it. So we don't need a verse to tell us that's prohibited. All we need is what we need the verse for is that was edible and then became non-edible later. Okay, Gemara continues. Amar Ula. Ula says, Machlokes, this case that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon are arguing whether negative flavor is permitted or not. That time is Yishpiach, that when it first entered, it gave a positive flavor. Was so pogam. But at the end of it, it gives a negative flavor. Aval pogim ikara, but if it gives a net negative flavor in the first place, divrei kol mutter. Everyone, including Rabbi Meir, holds it's permitted. So the case they're arguing about is when it originally made it better, but now it makes it worse. We'll see a case of that later, pretty soon actually. But when it entered it, it gave a negative flavor. There, everyone agrees it's permitted. The only case they're arguing is when it originally makes it better, but then over time somehow this flavor, right now when you come to eat it, that now the flavor is worse. So Eisvei Rav Huna Le'ula. If Huna challenged Ula on this statement, it says that everyone agrees if it started out as a negative flavor, then it's permitted. So the yayin, if one shenavlasoch adashim, it fell into some lentils. The chometz and vinegar shenavlasoch grisim, that fell into some chopped up lentils.
Split beans.
What? Split beans. Split beans. Also, it is prohibited. Rabbi Shimon Mati. Rabbi Shimon said it is fine. It says but here the pagami karahu, but when it originally came in, it gave a negative flavor. Upligi, and they're arguing. Right? Rabbi Shimon says it's a negative flavor, it makes it taste worse. It's permitted. Amar Ula says. So Amar Ula Chana. So Ula Chaga. So Chaga, who asked this question on him, Lo Meiri Yada Maika Amar Rabbanan. He doesn't understand what the rabbi is saying. Tivzil Kamosiv. He's trying to ask a question from this. He doesn't understand what they're saying. He doesn't know what's going on. This is what the case is. The novel so grease and sonanim. It fell into cold split beans. And warmed it up. So apparently, vinegar in cold beans is good, but vinegar in hot beans is not good. So the vinegar fell into cold beans.
That's salad dressing.
What?
That's salad dressing.
Right, that's salad dressing. That's good. When you warm it up, that doesn't taste good anymore. That's the case that he's saying. That's the case that Ula says they're arguing about. Is when it originally gave a negative flavor, now it gave a good flavor. Well, I guess they're definitely cooked. If you're talking about eating them, they're cooked already. I don't know anyone who eats raw beans, but I guess a year and a half ago, some of the community accidentally, put their beans in the cholent without cooking them first, and they came out after being cholent overnight. They said it was completely inedible. What? That's why I always use canned beans. You don't have to worry about it. Right. So you put it in when it was cold, and then you boiled it. Hitichan. Nasa, that's considered to be Kamisha Yishpiach. It originally gave a good flavor. Sof pagam, and then at the end it was negative usher, and it's prohibited according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yochanan says no, but pogam ikara machlokas. They're arguing about a case when it originally gave a negative flavor. They're asking within the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. They're arguing when it originally gives a negative flavor. When you first put it in, it gives a negative flavor. But if it originally gave a good flavor and turned bad, that Evan agrees is prohibited. Even Rabbi Shimon, who says that negative flavor is permitted. But if it originally gave a positive flavor and turned negative, even Rabbi Shimon would say that's prohibited. Or maybe bein mizu machlokas. Or maybe in both cases they're arguing. Even whether it originally gave a negative flavor, originally gave a positive flavor, either way, at the end, since right now it's negative, Rabbi Shimon says permitted, and Meir says it's prohibited. As a take we don't know what Rabbi Yochanan holds. We don't know how Rabbi Yochanan learns this debate. Amar Rav Amram. Ramam says, "After Isa lahad Rabbi Yochanan, is it possible that Rabbi Yochanan said is true? Lo tani lemas nisan, and there's no source of it anywhere. There's no brisa that tells us that nosim tam lefgam is permitted. In this case, that when it comes in the first place, there's no brisa that tells us that. So nafak, he went out, docked, he investigated. He found a brisa. Brisa says, "Seor shel cholin." You have some kind of leavening agent, sourdough starter. Dr. Cotton, you're still there? Can you hear in person? No, I don't know if you're there. I have Cotton still on. Yeah, it looks like you're still there.
I'm here. We're both
Fine.
here.
You're the sourdough starter expert.
Yes.
Okay, so sourdough starter. So sour shel chulin, of regular chulin, permitted normal kosher food. Shenafel he said, fell into the dough. The yesh lahachmitz, and it has enough power in it to leaven it. That's it. All you need. And it actually did the process of leavening. And afterwards, nafel sour shel truma. After that, you have another sourdough starter that's truma fell in. Now the rule is if something adds a flavor or it has an impact on the quality of the process, like leavening agent, even if it's not necessarily a flavor that's imparting, but it has an impact on the whole food, that in general, if you have non-kosher leavening, that would make the whole thing non-kosher. In this case, you have the kosher leavening, leaven the bread, and now you put the non-kosher, the truma leavening for a Kohen, for a non-Kohen, for Kohen it's kosher, for non-Kohen it's not kosher, leavening comes in and makes it over-leavened. Osor shel kalai kerem, or you have the sourdough starter made out of kalai kerem. Kalai kerem is when you have a vineyard that has other plants growing in it, and that's forbidden to have any benefit from. So if someone didn't realize, harvested wheat, they grew in the vineyard, and somehow it turned into sourdough starter, and that fell in, same halacha. The yeshua l'kei chametz, and the second amount that fell in had by itself enough to make it leaven, if the first one had not already done the job. Also, that is prohibited. Rabbi Shimon matu, Rabbi Shimon permits it. Right? It's prohibited because the thing that fell in had the power to make it leaven. Shimon says, but right now it's spoiling it. It's already leavened. This is a net negative flavor. So it's prohibited. But here, but that first, as soon as it falls in, since the leavening process is already finished in the first place, and now it came in, it's automatic. As soon as it falls in, it's making it taste worse. Plea, and still they're arguing. So you see that everyone agrees. So that the argument applies even when it first makes a negative flavor. They're not only arguing when it makes it positive and turns negative, but they're still arguing when it starts out as a negative flavor. Rabbi Zera says, no, Shani Isa, dough is different. It's fit to leaven other dough, meaning you've ruined this batch of sourdough. Right? That you have too much leavening fell in, it's been over leavened, you're not going to eat it now. That doesn't mean it's garbage. You can take this over leavened sourdough, and now you can divide it up. You have a lot of sourdough starter now. You may not have a loaf of sourdough right now, but you have lots of sourdough starter. So in a sense, it's a positive thing. Even though that wasn't your plan, you want to do the bread. You're not planning on just increasing your size of your sourdough starter. You have plenty already, but nevertheless, it's not. When it originally falls in, it's not ruining it from all edibility. It still has a use. Okay, Tashma. Let's see another proof. Or shel truma, you have a sourdough starter of truma that only Kohen can eat. Shel chulin, and also one of chulin of non-truma that anyone can eat. That fell into a dough. This one has enough to make it leaven. And this one has enough to make it leaven. And they made it leaven together. Aser, it is prohibited. B'shimon matir. B'shimon allows it. If at first the truma fell in, divrei kol aser, everyone agrees it is prohibited. Nafal shel chulin, if the first one that fell in was the chulin one that's written to everyone. V'achakach nafal shel truma, and afterwards the sourdough starter of truma fell in. Oshel kalai kerem, or the sourdough starter of kalai kerem of plants grew in a vineyard. Aser, that is prohibited. Rabbi Shimon matir, Shimon permits it. It says Vahacha, but in this case, when you have the pagami kara upligi that originally gives a negative flavor. I guess I think it's time of the second case. So no, the third case. First the chulin falls in, and then the truma falls in, and so by the time the truma fell in, it's already leavened, so it makes a negative flavor. And they're arguing. Now, v'chite, maybe you'll try to answer hachinami kid Rabbi Zera, like the same answer Rabbi Zera said, that it's fit to make other things leaven, so that's not a proof. But still, Tashma Miseifa, look at further on in this brisa. It says Hayayin shenaflo soch adashim. You have wine that fell into lentils. The hometz anaflo soch grisin, and you have vinegar that fell into these chopped beans. Aser is prohibited. Rabbi Shimon matir, Rabbi Shimon permitted it. Vaha hachinami. In this case, also the pagami kara that originally gave a negative flavor, upligi, and they're still arguing. Now, we can answer that one too. Chitema, maybe you'll say, Hachinam Kedashani le'ula le'Rebbe Chaga, the same answer that Ula said to Rebbe Chaga, Shehishbiach l'sov pagam, that when it first made a good flavor, and then it went bad. When it was put in, it fell into the cold beans, and eventually heated up. So right now it's a negative, but based on it falling in, it was not negative. So this also wouldn't be proof. So we just brought this price to proof and said maybe you could push aside both parts of the price and say it's not a proof. Or me pligi, but do they really argue in this case? But do they really argue in this case when it first made a good flavor and in the end it made a negative flavor? Bakatani, but it says in the brisa, first the truma fell in. Everyone says it is prohibited. Everyone says it's prohibited. Rather, so lav shmam, don't we see from this pagami kara machlok is an arguing case where it first makes a negative flavor. In the case where the truma falls in, that originally makes a good flavor and eventually goes negative. If you leave, the truma falls in, it leavens it, and eventually it gets over leavened. So right now it's a negative flavor. When it first fell in, it was a positive flavor. That's the case with the arguing. That seems to indicate that if it first falls in, it was negative. Everyone agrees it's prohibited. Love shmamina. Don't we hear from this pagami kar machlokas that when it first makes a negative flavor, that's where they're arguing. Shmamina. That's from this we hear that's where we're arguing. I'm missing something. Oh, right. The case, right. That's it. Right. It's the case where the leavening falls in and makes it good originally. Right. That's the case they're arguing. When it originally falls in and it helps, but eventually it's over leavened. That's where they're arguing. But the case when it falls in originally and makes it taste bad in the first place, everybody agrees that is prohibited. Now the Gemara asks, Hani plus a babi, the katani, lamali. Why do we need all three cases? 3 cases of dough falling in. Right, let's just review if you want to turn back to Samach Tes. Right, the first case was you have the truma truma and chulin both fall in together, and each one is enough to make it leaven. That is a machlokas. The first opinion says aser, Rishon says permitted. The second opinion says first the truma fell in, everyone agrees that's aser, and the third case is the chulin fell in first, and then the truma fell in, and that's also a machlokas. So why do we need all 3 of these cases? Together, first truma, first chulin. Why do we need all 3 combinations? I understand why you need the last one. Kamashmalan teaches us the pogemi kara machlokas, that the case they're arguing is when it originally makes a negative flavor, when the truma fell in second, the truma fell in the end after it already leavened, and still they're arguing. Matzia Sanam, in the middle case also we need. Why? Ishbiach Lusof Pogem, that talks about a case when it originally gave a good flavor, that the truma fell in first. Divrei Kol Aser, everyone agrees, is prohibited because since it originally gave a positive flavor, even though now it's negative, but Evan agrees that doesn't help. Ella, rather, Reisha, the first case, when they fell in together, Lamali, why do you need that? Hashda, now you know, Masefa, what do we know in the end case? Lokash Mishbach Klal, that doesn't make any positive effect at all. Asir Bani, the rabbis say it's prohibited. Reisha, the first case, that makes a positive place in the first place. Boy, do I need to know that the rabbis say it is prohibited? So Amar Baye says, Reisha, the Rabbi Shimon, no, the reason we need the first case is going to Rabbi Shimon, who says that it's permitted in the last case. Right? In the last case where you have the truma falls in at the end, and Rabbi Shimon says that's permitted, because in that case, by the time the truma fell in, it was fully negative, right? If the kosher leavening falls in, then the truma falls in afterwards, and still Rabbi Shimon says it's permitted. So the first case where they fall together, there it could be there is better, so there is worse, according to Rabbi Shimon, because here in the first place it was a not a net negative when it first fell in. So you might think in that case, Rabbi Shimon would agree that it's prohibited. That's why it's a chiddush to say that when they fell in together, that is permitted according to Rabbi Shimon. This is what he's saying. Coming later about in Rabbi Shimon. These are what the rabbi said to Rabbi Shimon. Isazu, this dough, rui lahachmitz b'shtei shaos. This dough, if it had only normally it would take 2 hours to leaven. Migarm l'shetachmitz b'sha'achas. What made it leaven in just a single hour? Isser, this non-kosher truma, the truma or the kilai kerem leaven that fell in. Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon will say, when they first fell in, and the 11 made 11, together, two of them operate together. And when it went bad, the two of them together made it go bad. Meaning, on the one hand, the rabbis say view it this way: had it only been for the kosher leavening, it would have taken 2 hours. The non-kosher leavening is basically, you could view it single-handedly speeding it up. So it's positive. And Shimon says, no, at the time it was positive, then together they made it leaven. In that first hour, they're both positive effect. The second hour, they're both negative effect. Don't blame the negative all on the non-kosher. No, the positive part was to do them together. Even though at the end of the day, the fact that it leavened so quickly is negative because now it's spoiled. But at the beginning, when it was positive, it was positive, and now that it's negative, the whole thing is negative. They're both negative. More asked, the Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, starif heter v'isser v'oser v'hadiyadadi v'litzer. Why don't you combine the two leavening powers at the same time together, v'litzer, and say it's usser? Says Rabbi Shimon Latane. Rabbi Shimon is following his own opinion. To Amar, afilu isser v'isser nami lo mitzarfi. He says even two things that are different names of prohibitions together will not combine. We had an opinion that you saw, I think, yesterday, that you have two different kinds of averas, but each one is less than the minimum amount. It's still prohibited. Shimon argues on it. Shimon says no. Even two things that are completely prohibited can't combine. For sure, something is prohibited and something permitted can't combine. Even things that are two things that are completely prohibited themselves, each one less than the sufficient amount, still that's going to be permitted. That he said that's enough to be permitted. The Tana says in the Mishnah, Orla v'kilai kerem mitzarfim, that you have something orla. Orla is the first 3 years of a tree. Kilai kerem we mentioned we have another plant that grows together in a vineyard. Mitzarfim, they combine. If someone eats one kazayas of the combination, two of them, that counts as a full avera with full punishment. Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Ein mitzarfim, they can't combine. Each one is a separate avera. And therefore, this one I didn't do half a kazayas. I didn't do a whole kazayas of kilai kem of something grew in a vineyard. I didn't have a whole kazayas of orla first year of the tree. I didn't have a kedai either one, even though everything I ate was non-kosher. But since it's two different averas of non-kosher, they can't combine. There's no punishment for that in this world, at least. Okay. Moving on. Hahu achbara, this mouse, tenafa lachavisa de shekra, that it fell into a barrel of beer. Asre Rav lahu shekra. Rav says that beer is not kosher. Amrua Rabbanan Kamei Rav Sheshis. They said it. They said this a lot in front of Rav Sheshis. Nema, let's propose Kasavar that he holds that Rav holds notion Tamlas Gam is usher, that something gives a negative flavor, it is prohibited. That's why it says this mouse that fell into the beer is prohibited. So Amalu Rav Shesha said back to them, but Alma, in a normal case, Sava Rav holds this in Tamlas Gam mutter, that a net negative flavor is permitted. But here, Chidushu, it is a Chidush, it's something above and beyond the Torah said. The Hamimas Mais, because the mouse, even by itself, is disgusting. People wouldn't eat it. Even so, the Torah says it is prohibited. Hilkot, therefore, so the negative flavor is also prohibited, meaning no one eats mice because they're disgusting. So the mice itself is a negative flavor. Normally, we said earlier, you have a carcass of an animal that's rotted. It's technically kosher because it's not edible. It's not, normally a normal person wouldn't want to eat it. Even a fresh mouse, a normal person wouldn't want to eat. So, and the Torah says for sure you don't eat mice. Well, that's what I have to say, don't eat mice. A fresh mouse is like a rotted carcass. If rotted carcass is permitted, a fresh mouse should be prohibited also. Why is the Torah prohibiting it? Must be even though it tastes negative, the Torah says don't eat it anyway. It's an exception to the general principle that says only thing that tastes good is not kosher. A mouse, even if it tastes bad, is not kosher. But since if a mouse is eating the mouse itself, it doesn't taste good, is not kosher. So if it gives a negative flavor, why is that any different? Why is that flavor any different? That's why the mouse in the beer is negative. It is, even though it's negative, it's still not kosher. Rabbi said back to Rav Sheshes, Elmiyata, based on what you're saying, why wouldn't you say a mouse is tameh even when it's spoiled, even when it's all dried out? The basic principle that something is only tameh when it's fresh. It has a ritual impurity. Besides not being kosher, but it's only tameh when it's edible. When the mouse spoils and becomes no longer edible, it's no longer tameh. It comes into contact with truma, it will not spread tuma after it's rotted. But tell me, even a fresh mouse is going to be rotted, then when the mouse goes and rots, why is it no longer tameh? Al-Matan, it says in the Mishnah, the Tamim Lachim, the Shiratzim, the eight species of sherets that are tameh, and one of them is a mouse. The Tamim Lachim make them tameh when they're fresh and moist, they tameh yavation, but when they're desiccated, they do not make it tameh. Right, well, hold on a second. Time out when your logic, Shikva Zera to tameh lach v'yavish. Then human seed should only be tameh. It should tameh even when it's dried out. He was saying drying out is not a cause to lose its tameh status. Then human seed also should not lose its status of being tameh when it dries out. Elamai yislach l'meimer. What do you have to say? Why is that going to be not a? Why is that? So Alma says, I skipped. Alma, we see in Bryce, it's in the mission, it's a Tanam and Lachim, that by there also it's only mixed, is tummy when it's wet, when it's moist. We aim at tummyation, not when it's dried out. What are you going to say? You can't say there it's spoiled from eating. There in the first place, no one eats it. It's not, no one eats it. The Maimar, you have to say, what are you going to say? Shechva Zera Asir Achmana, that when it defines what's prohibited, it says that the seed for planting is prohibited. But Ruy Lasvia only when it's fit to plant, only when it's fit to grow. So that's prohibited. When it dries out, it's not tameh anymore because it's not fit to grow. Hachinami, it says similar to here when it talks about the sharats and the species of these 8 species of creepy crawlies, it says b'mosam in their deaths. Amar Rachman, the Torah says that's when they're tameh. Ain mosam, like the point of death. When they're fresh, like at the point of death, that's when they're tummy. When they're desiccated and they're no longer similar to the time of death, then they are not tummy. So even though you're right that even though in the first place it's bad, so it can't get any worse, nevertheless, what changes when it dries out is that it no longer resembles death. So when it comes to non-kosher, Rav is saying that the non-kosher does not change when they dry out. But the Tameh says we have a special definition as when in their death, only are they similar to the way they were when they died. So Maskiv la Rav Simon Eradai challenge it. It says Mi Mais is it really disgusting? The whole basis that Rav is usher is that mice in the first place are disgusting. Ola al shulchan shel malachim. A mouse is a dish that's fit to serve a king. You can't say it's disgusting. Kings eat mice. And this is funny, one of my favorite lines because there's a famous kid story. Omer of Simi min Eradai said, "Lo kasha, it's not a question." Even though he's the one who asked the question, it's not a question. Ha de dabra, ha de masa. There's a difference between the country mouse and the city mouse. There's a difference between the country mouse and the city mouse. The country mouse, right, is fit to serve a king. It's delicious. City mouse is disgusting. So city mouse is disgusting. Yeah, the Torah says it's prohibited. Country mouse, you're right. They're delicious. Never tried it. Don't intend to. It's still not kosher. But country mouse is delicious. It has wholesome, wholesome country food. City mouse eats city garbage. It is not tasty.
That's so cute.
Right. But famous kid story. Right, you saw it here first. So Amar Rava says, Hilchas the halacha is nosim tam nefkam mutter. If the flavor that gives a net negative result is permitted. But the mouse in the beer, lo yidana my time at a Rav. I don't know the reasoning for Rav. It might be because Kasavi holds nosim tam nefkam aser, that when it gives a net negative flavor, it is prohibited. And we don't pass like him then. If that's the reasoning of Rav, that in general he holds net negative flavor is prohibited, we don't pass like him. Oh, or maybe Mishum de Kasaver, nosim tam nefkam mutter. He holds that a negative flavor is permitted. But the mouse in the beer, makes it better. So I'm not sure what the explanation for Rav is. Maybe he holds that the mouse that even though it makes a negative flavor, it's prohibited, and we don't pass it. If that's what he holds, that we don't pass it like that. Maybe he holds the mouse makes the beer taste better, and if he holds the mouse makes the beer taste better, maybe we do pass it like that. I'm not sure.
Country mouse that fell in, not a city mouse.
Yeah, I get right. Yeah. Okay, and I think we're actually caught up now. So for Rabbi Glazer, we're 2 words behind. There's time to put on tefillin. Okay. Have a nice day. You too.